Good evening. Tonight is a planning commission meeting. We're also hybrid interactive technology format. We're going to call the meeting to order for May 3rd, 2023 at 6 p.m. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Number 3 is the approval of the meeting agenda. Frank?
Yes, Madam Chair. I would just like to make a quick note that the application for the public hearing for the variance to decrease acreage for allowance of a rooster at 8330 178th Lane Northeast has been withdrawn. So I know that's already on your agenda, but I just wanted to make sure that was noted.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
This is Barb Bovick, so moved with the withdrawal of the variance.
Is there-
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion?
And that would, just to clarify, removing number 8, correct?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Call for the vote.
Bethany, I.
Barb, aye.
Judy, aye.
Lynn, aye. Number 4, we have the approval of the April 5th, 2023 public hearing minutes, interim use permit for Clear Channel Dynamic Billboard at 9500 145th Avenue Northeast. Is there a motion to approve?
This is Barb. I'll motion for approval.
Bethany, I'll second.
Any additions or corrections? I'll call for the vote.
Judy, aye.
Barb, aye.
Bethany, I.
Lynn, aye. Then I'll look for a motion for the approval of the April 5th, 2023 public hearing minutes for the preliminary plat Kettle Cove Estates.
This is Judy. I so make a motion to approve.
This is Barb, seconded.
Any additions or corrections? I'll call for a vote.
Bethany, I.
Barb, aye.
Judy, aye.
And Lynn, aye. Now we need a motion for the approval of the April 5th, 2023 public hearing minutes for the ordinance 23-01, Chapter 7A Amendment, Small Animal Facilities.
This is Bethany, so moved.
This is Barb. I'll second that.
Any additions or corrections? I'll call for the vote.
Bethany, I.
Barb, aye.
Judy, aye.
Lynn, aye. Okay. Now we'll open the public hearing and discussion for the special interim use permit for
Excuse me.
running aces.
I think you missed item 6. You
Number
did Kettle
8
Cove
was
for
withdrawn.
No. You did the Kettle Cove for the preliminary plat, but not for the conditional use permit minutes. Right?
What number are you on?
Number 6.
No, we did that one.
You did the preliminary plat, which was number 5. There were 2 hearings. Right? I'm just making sure we got it. Elizabeth is nodding yes.
You did.
The way it's listed, the hearings were combined, but the way it's listed, you would need 2 motions.
Okay, so I only have one. Oh, so we need a conditional use permit motion and then the
You did,
planned unit development.
yeah, you did the plat already.
Okay.
So you just need to do a motion for number 6.
But we didn't get a copy of it.
Those hearings were concurrent,
Oh,
so,
They were combined, but the way they're listed, they have to do 2 motions.
yep.
oh, I see. Okay, yeah, they are both on the same one. Okay.
So we need a motion for the planned unit development of Kettle Cove Estates.
This is Barb. Motion to approve.
This is Judy, I second. Additions or corrections? Call for the vote.
Bethany, I.
Barb, aye.
Judy, I.
Lynn, aye. Now we'll open the public hearing. Special use permit for Running Aces events, pages 6 through 39. And Frank Keenan, do you want to give us a report?
Absolutely. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held by the City of Columbus Planning Commission on Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023 at 6 p.m. or soon thereafter as parties may be heard. The hearing will be conducted in person and by interactive technology at the Columbus City Hall located at 16319 Kettle River Boulevard, Columbus, Minnesota, to consider a request for an interim use permit to host additional activities and special events at an identified location on premises in the horse racing zoning district. Members of the public interested in attending in person, monitoring the meetings, or wanting more information should contact the city offices at 651-464-3120 or visit the city website at columbusmn.us. The hearing shall continue until all evidence and testimony has been received. Applicant Running Aces Casino, Hotel, and Racetrack, Brooke Olson, property owner, North Metro Harness Initiative, LLC. Property location, 15201 Zurich Street Northeast, Columbus, Minnesota. Legal description, Lot 1, Block 1, North End Metro Harness Initiative 2, Anoka County, Minnesota.
Thank you, Frank. Will the representatives from Running Aces approach the table, have a seat, tell us your name and your address, and make sure you speak into the microphone so we can get you online and everyone here can hear.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Aaron Bedessom with Running Aces, 15201 Running Aces Boulevard, Columbus, Minnesota, 55025.
Brooke Olson, also with Running Aces.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to?
Yeah, so
Over
thank you
with
again.
us?
So the only two things that have changed from what we have done in previous years, so 7 years ago, I think our original one ended just before COVID or just in COVID. So we were on a 5-year as a renewal. The only events that have really changed, we have added in 2 things that are different from previous, and those would be the last 2 on here. The 2 of them being drive-in theater as an option. So we were toying with this during COVID, and then it has come up for some other events this fall. But basically, that event would be having a large movie screen and then an FM transmitter within cars, so it will be, you know, like a drive-in movie in our parking lot. We're still working to see on how the screen would be, or it won't be facing the highway or anything, but just which directions it will be in our parking lot. And the other event would be, we were looking at working with Fractional Toys as a benefit to our players, as something we would want. And basically with them, it's offering some different rental equipment to our players. So it would also be used where the public could use their things as well. It's a small amount of toys like a boat or four-wheeler. It's nothing that would be taking over our parking lot. It's something we would have on kind of the northern side. And that would be the other new thing we're looking at. The last thing I have is just one kind of correction or thing to have changed based on that we noticed on the special IUP recommendations. This would be page 3, bullet number 10. It says food and beverage to be associated with any special event to be exclusively through Running Aces. For food and alcohol, we have traditionally brought in outside food vendors and licensed food trucks. The alcohol has always stayed exclusively with us, and us obviously going through and getting the permits for our catering license for the alcohol, but just to note that if we can have outside food trucks. So number 10 just being exclusively for alcohol And basically kind of striking the exclusive for food.
Frank, do you want to give the report?
Yeah. Yeah, so that would be on the bottom of page 38 of your packet. And I believe that is in line with everything in the ordinance, so that should not be an issue. Yeah. Yep. So I can go ahead and do that then. Just strike that and then add exclusively to alcohol licenses, if that is what the planning commission would like its recommendation. It's in,
So the staff accepts the change.
okay, so yes, the staff accepts the change.
What are we doing there? We're striking number 10?
No, we're accepting, the applicant has asked for a change in the verbiage in number 10 because they would like to use food trucks and they do not want the food exclusively coming from Running Aces because at the current time they use food trucks in the parking lot. So he is asking for a change. The staff has accepted that change as we see no issue with having food trucks as a part of the special events permit. It's whether the planning commission wants to accept that change.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
I would like to make a clarification for the planning commission. This is kind of a unique permit. The reason why we call it a special interim use permit is it is a little bit of a deviation from what's in the current code. So today we have interim use permits for a variety of different reasons. In this particular case, when Running Aces came before the council the first time that they applied for this permit, it was asking whether they could have nonprofits, other organizations use their facilities for a variety of different reasons. And while Running Aces would allow them to use the facilities, Running Aces would not necessarily plan the events, but they would host them. And again, others would then be able to use their facilities, whether it was food, bathrooms, liquor, and those sorts of things. So it was a good cooperative effort between nonprofits and other amenities and what they do every day. So we created this special interim use permit to allow them to do that. So over the years, they've had, I can't even remember all the different 5K races, and Aaron, you could probably tell them the one that, you know, where they dressed up, and then there was other ones that they did that when they came in, and so the other one where they had all the different events where you had to go through things, and you know, balls were coming at you while you had to run. I forget what they used to call them, but anyway, fun types of events.
Great inflatable 5K.
That was it, the Great Inflatable 5K, there you go. But it was those type of events. They were mostly nonprofits or nonprofits that hosted them, but it allowed a forum for it because they have the parking, they have the room for it, and so it was a good working relationship with the community and also with Running Aces because they wanted to foster this in the community. So this permit is good for 5 years, and the agreement was Running Aces would list all of the events they thought they would want. And with that, we would have an administrative process, so when they want to run these events, we could then process the permit administratively as long as they kept within the confines of all the events that they listed. I got to say, it's worked really well over the years. We've really had no issues. I think people have had a lot of fun with all the events they've had there. I think there's been a little hiatus in the last 3 years, but I know they plan to have events in the future. And again, it's been I think a win-win for everyone who's been involved with these activities, you know, just as a community. So just a little background.
Okay. Is there any discussions or questions from the commission members?
So I have a question about the ending time of 11 p.m. Is that how it was in the last?
On the weekends, that's what we had, Madam Chair and Commissioner. It was set at 11. I know we went through many rounds back and forth at other planning commission meetings, probably about 12, 13 years ago. And as Elizabeth started, it started as a few events, starting with concerts, 5Ks, things like that. And it's grown to this bigger packet that includes go-kart races in the parking lot and now a drive-in movie, as we've had different groups and different needs as times have changed. But the time was set that way as through many discussions on what a fair time would be on a Friday or Saturday evening. And if I can just add one more thing as it pops in my head of, and that was also based on findings from what was found around other cities, you know, whether it was a midnight or a 1 o'clock and the 11 o'clock was what matched or was a little bit more tighter than other cities.
And that has not been an issue, that time frame?
Not that I'm aware of.
Chair and Commissioners, not to our knowledge.
In the year that I've been here, I haven't heard any issue about that. I know last year I did approve some of those that did have an 11 p.m. end time, so that has been in place before.
Okay.
The only concern that came up was with Muddy Paws, the dog facility, boarding facility. And the time wasn't necessarily the factor, it was more the music in general, but it wasn't necessarily on the timing.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open the public hearing up to the public. If there's anyone that has anything to say regarding this permit? Nope.
Yes. So I actually, thank you for mentioning that, Aaron. I'm the owner of Muddy Paws. I actually rent the building space from my dad. This is Joe Lefto. He owns the building property and I rent from him and run my business out of that. We did have a chance this morning to talk with Aaron and Brooke and kind of just express our concerns with the noise of the concert and just kind of what that would look like for us in the future. I know, you know, we obviously are going to always put the care of our dogs first. And last year I'd noticed, you know, the noise was kind of just stressed them out a lot and our building was shaking throughout the day. So we were trying to come to a consensus on how we can be good neighbors, how they can still operate and do their activities, bring the community together, and how we can still always put our dogs first. So we did have a conversation with them and that's why we're present tonight. But I don't know if you had anything to add.
No, the conversation centered around the impact on the dogs, the responsibility we have to provide notice to the dog owners, and the, you know, loss in revenue that creates on those days when they have that event. Running Ace, it was a good meeting. Running Aces has agreed to, you know, work with us, and we will, you know, document what happens during those events, and they've agreed to work with us and cooperate with us. So in general, we're in favor of these activities as long as we can all be good neighbors during the process.
Thank you. Any other comments or concerns? We will now close the public hearing and open the floor to the Planning Commission members to discuss the application. Any discussion?
Well, I'm a little concerned about Muddy Paws now. Do they have animals overnight? Are they allowed that?
Yes, so we have daycare during the day and then at night we board dogs overnight. And after talking with Running Aces, should we have a concert coming up, we would definitely provide far in advance public notice to all of our customers, because if a concert is happening on a Saturday night, we have customers that'll stay with us. You know, they're going out for the weekend, so they'll board Friday through Sunday. And so that's kind of 3 days worth of, I guess you could say, revenue that we would be losing, but we would definitely want to always put our dogs first and let the customers know, hey, if you're planning on boarding during this time, like it's going to be loud. If your dog is prone to being stressed in those types of environments, like we would highly advise against that. And that's kind of why we had talked to Running Aces about if we're losing a bunch of our customers because of these loud noises, we would love to, you know, just work something out with them.
So our conditional use permit allows us 26 kennels, I believe, and 8 crates at our facility at any given time.
Does that answer your question?
I just don't know why all of a sudden it's a problem. Running Aces has been there and having events.
Well, last year was the first event that we experienced as a new owner of this building. And it was the first experience we had of some issues that our dogs had as a result of a concert. That's why we met up with Running Aces prior to this meeting to figure out how we can work together during an event like this. And I think we can do that.
Thank you. And I appreciate the fact that they went to Running Aces and dealt, you know, talked to them, and everybody's kind of, you know, they know what their concerns are. So hopefully going forward, it can, you know, be resolved. So we'll just have to see how it goes.
Well, Elizabeth, so this will be handled through Running Aces and the owners of Muddy Paws? I mean,
I'm not sure what condition you would place. You know, noise is a public nuisance, but I'm not hearing that it's a public nuisance. I'm hearing that the dogs are sensitive to loud noises, and so I'm hearing that they're working out an issue. So, and they only go till 11 at night. So, I'm not sure. I would have to ask the attorney if there was something else, you know what I mean, that we can refer to if it was necessary, or what he would recommend.
yeah, because all of us that own dogs have certain days that 4th of July, hunting season, you know, that affect our animals, but there's really nothing we can do about it. So I am not understanding why the city would be involved in that. I mean,
So to be clear, from Muddy Paws perspective, we aren't asking the city to put any type of conditions on this. We're just here publicly stating that, you know, as I think we have a responsibility as a facility that takes care of dogs to care for those dogs. If there wasn't cooperation with Running Aces, there would be an issue for these dogs. But, you know, we're just letting everyone know that we are in cooperation with Running Aces to keep this from being an issue for the dogs or their owners. And, you know, it should be viewed as a good news story. We're trying to be good neighbors.
Yep. I mean, at least if they can notify their pet owners that there will be noise, you know, I mean, that's a win-win, and see how it goes.
Yeah, as long as we have 30 days notice, you know, on a concert.
Yeah.
The rest of it, you know, doesn't matter. The dogs might like the movies, but as far as a loud concert goes, that's the one thing that really impacts us. The type of building we have and everything else, it really reverberates in there. Yeah. And so they've agreed to provide notice, and you know, and we will certainly let our customers know that will have an impact on those days. But we're agreeing to work that out between the two parties.
Great. Is there a motion?
There is. This is Judy. I make a motion to recommend approval of the Running Aces event special interim use permit, 1520 Zurich Street Northeast, based on findings of fact number 1 through 24 and conditions 1 through 21 of the planner's report dated April 28th, 2023.
With the amendment
From page, what number was it?
number
Number
10.
10, page 38.
Page 38, with the amendment noted on page 38.
Is there a second?
This is Bethany, I'll second.
I'll call for the vote.
Judy, aye.
Barb, excuse me, Barb, aye.
Bethany, aye.
Lynn, aye. So thank you for coming tonight, Aaron and Brooke. This will go in front of the council next Wednesday, May 10th at 6 p.m. for approval. One down. Okay, now we'll open our second public hearing. It's a conditional use permit for planned unit development, Columbus Industrial Park, pages 40 through 83, and the enclosure. Frank?
Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held by the City of Columbus Planning Commission on Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023 at 6 p.m. or as soon thereafter as parties may be heard. The hearing will be conducted in person and by interactive technology at the Columbus City Hall located at 16319 Kettle River Boulevard, Columbus, Minnesota, to consider a request for a conditional use permit allowing a planned unit development for Columbus Industrial Park to create a phased development of 7 buildings for lease to other companies in the light industrial zoning district. Members of the public interested in attending in person, monitoring the meetings, or wanting more information should contact the city offices at 651-464-3120 or visit the city website at columbusmn.us. The hearing shall continue until all evidence and testimony has been received. Applicant Windsor Engineers Marcus Lee, property owner Brown Beagle LLC. Property location is vacant, and the legal description is that part of north 330 feet of north half of southwest of section 36, township 32, RGE 22, LYG WLY of C/L of county stated highway number 21, X Art Road, subject to easement of REC, Anoka County, Minnesota.
Thank you, Frank. So is it John Sawyer and Marcus Lee? If you want to take a seat at the table, state your name and address, and make sure you talk into the microphone.
So I'm Marcus Lee with Windsor Engineers, 500 North 3rd Street, Suite 100, Minneapolis, 55401. Phone number 612-428-0327.
Okay.
And I'm John Sawyer, owner of Brown Beagle LLC, 4 Hawk Lane, St. Paul, Minnesota, 55127.
Okay, and for the record, did you receive a copy of the staff report developed by Associate Planner Frank Kanan? Or this one was Dean Johnson? You did this one? Okay. With the finding of facts 1 through 25 on pages 79 to 83. And do you understand these recommendations and conditions? And do you have any questions or comments?
I understand them. I don't have any questions.
Yeah, same thing.
Dean, would you like to review this with us?
I think they'd like to
Oh.
do a presentation.
Sorry. Do you want to present your project?
Yeah. So,
Be closer into the microphone.
yeah. So Columbus Industrial Park will be a 7-building development. The uses of these buildings are not yet determined. It's going to depend on leasing to future businesses. We're anticipating it'll either be warehouse, office, or service related. And we've provided parking based on estimates on use of the building. So we're anticipating a 15 to 20% office use. The rest will either be warehouse or service use. In talks with Dean, we corrected a setback error, so the buildings can be located closer to the county road. The plans currently don't show this, but we just want to let you know that we may make that change in the future on these plans, but we've worked with the watershed and the county, so we're adding a turn lane into the property for a right turn, and we've got approval from Rice Creek Watershed for what we currently have shown.
Okay. You're up.
What would you like me to do? You want a summary, or do you want to take public comment? Do you have enough information for the public to comment? There are going to be 7 buildings. There are 3 phases of construction. It's about 69,200 square feet total space of buildings. We have nearly 150 parking spaces. And I think, as Marcus mentioned, there can be a variety of uses in here. And in the findings of fact, I think it's listed as number 12. I've laid out a variety of different potential uses to attempt to illustrate what may happen. Worst case, if you have more office use, which I'm not convinced that's going to be there. It's going to be accessory office to whatever business is there. It's not going to be an office building. It's just not the location for this. But if you had more service use, which might involve more employees, it has a higher parking ratio than pure warehouse. And so in that item number 12, I've just laid out, if you had higher service use, and if you had higher office use, less warehouse use, you might need more parking than they're showing. We don't know that. All of these parking spaces are communal in the sense that anybody can use them. Just because it's right next to your door, you hope your neighbor's not parked there, but it's going to be open to anyone to park, and so this is going to be a shared concept. It's kind of like our last subdivision at the last meeting where you average 2.5 acre lot with a 7.5. Somebody might have more office use or more service use. Somebody may be more inclined to have higher warehouse use. You might have a roofing contractor and the building has got a vehicle and a lot of shingles and 3 employees, and they're gonna not be the bigger user for parking spaces. And that'll balance with somebody that, again, maybe there's some sort of auto repair or appliance repair or whatever that may be more service oriented and generate the need for more parking. In the course of discussing this concern with the developer, we talked about the option for additional parking if it's ever necessary. And they have submitted a proof of parking plan, which gives an option to add up to 16, 18 additional parking spaces, which, you know, I can say gives me good comfort level. The condition that relates to that particular issue gives the city council, with, of course, reasonable notice, the authority to require that that additional parking be created. We're certainly not going to do that without evidence that it's needed. The county is not going to permit any business to park out on the highway The neighbors aren't going to encourage them to park on their properties, and so this is kind of a watchdog situation, and when you have potentially 7 or perhaps even more individual businesses on the property, I think it'll average out. But that was the purpose of doing that exercise. So we have some cushion for more parking if it's necessary. I've noted in here kind of a deadline based upon the developer's own perspective. They would like to start phase 1, which is the 2 easterly buildings immediately. There's a chance that they could start phase 2, the middle 3 buildings, this year also, probably more likely next year. As they come in with subsequent phases, we'll get additional details from them. We have in phase 1, the general building design, exterior building materials, they're going to remain the same throughout, but we don't have individual building details for any of the other phases, and so there's a condition that they'll have to come in advance of wanting a building permit and provide similar information that was done here. But in general, just so the neighbors understand, the city understands, all of the buildings, all 7 buildings throughout the 3 phases will have the same appearance and same building materials. Landscaping, they're proposing quite a few conifers on the south side of the property where we have an immediate neighbor to the south. There are deciduous trees that are proposed along the highway itself. The amount of trees that will be planted are probably double what the minimum ordinance requirement would be. So that's a conscious effort to add landscaping in key areas where it would be most useful. There are 2 wetlands on this property. The findings indicate the watershed district signed off on the delineations a whole year ago, and in January of this year issued a CAPROC, or a conditionally approved pending receipt of changes permit. It's not an actual permit, but it structures what requirements might be missing in order to get a permit. So with any kind of approval that the city may do, they still can't start work until they get the final conditions of the permit met. That might be just signing a final document and paying the remaining fees, but that'll dictate when a project like this will go. This development will be served by the extension of a city sanitary sewer and water line from West Freeway Drive to the very west end of the developed portion of the property. The developer will build it and turn it over to the city, and the city will own and maintain the utilities like we do other public utilities. There will be individual service lines then off of that main sewer and water line through the center of the development that serve each of the buildings. They will be building private stormwater retention facilities. There are a couple of glorified ditches on the east side of the development and a larger pond on the west side. And those ultimately, after cleaning the stormwater, go into the wetland that's to the west. I made one statement here based upon previous comments that have come from Planning Commission and the Council. In between these buildings, they had proposed a vinyl fence, and that is to avoid having dumpster enclosures, which our ordinance requires. They just felt that with a separate dumpster for each building, and they're not oversized dumpsters, it would be easier, particularly for the collection, for them to be in a location that's not, well, let's just say it's a little more flexible. So they're going to put fencing between all of the buildings, a 6-foot vinyl fence, and that will preclude any outside storage of equipment, vehicles, any authorized materials. I don't know that they're can be much authorized outside storage because it would have to occupy a parking space, which our conditions say you can't put the storage in there. They can park their own vehicle in it, but they can't put a pallet of roof shingles. That's got to go in the building. We also described that the parking of vehicles, any equipment, and any authorized storage would be between the buildings, excluding the east side, so you won't have any overnight parking of anything facing West Freeway Drive. Back to the fence, I've noted in the past that some people objected to white vinyl fencing, and I put a provision in here that it be a different color, complementary or similar to the building. And I haven't heard the owner complain, so again, that's just based on some previous comments. They tend to be a little stark and bright. So with that, I'll answer any questions you may have, or we can come back and talk again after you open the hearing.
Well, thank you, Dean. I did that because when we were dealing with Kettle Cove, neighbors were coming up after they heard your report. Then it made sense to them. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming. And I'm going to open it up to any neighbors or public that has a comment about the project. Okay, so can I have you guys go sit back down, and can you come up to the table, sit down, state your name and address? Speak into the microphone, please.
My name's Chi Vang. I live next door to the development what's going to happen right now.
And your address?
13626 Freeway Drive, right next door.
Okay.
So walking across. And we're a little concerned about, having a pond back there, attract more mosquitoes to our kids and more traffic. We had 2 kids, young kids too, So that's why we're here today. Safety of our kids. Don't want a lot of traffic, not a lot of noise. We got enough noise from the highway already. And the reason why we moved to the city of Columbus is we want a little quiet and, more family life like everybody else, So now the development's coming. I mean, I'd be glad if it was a company would bring more jobs in instead of like a warehouse where people just come and rent it, they're in and out, I'm a little concerned about that,
Okay. I mean, I'm assuming that these businesses that go in there are going to bring jobs to the community. Maybe I'm thinking not, but I think the offer of the landscaping, how they've offered to do double the amount of trees is amazing. I mean, not everybody does that. So.
Right, they cut down maybe about 2 acres of trees already, so, yeah, and I'm really concerned about bugs, noise, and traffic, so, if it's gonna be property for them to rent it out to other people just to use, then I don't think that's a good idea for us being a neighbor right next door, just walking distance right across from it,
Anything else? State your name and address.
Okay, so my name is Kia Yang, and my address is 13626 Freeway Drive, and yes, we live right next door to it. So the reason why we're here today is because we're just a little concerned. The reason why we moved up here to Columbus was the peaceful, the very quiet. Nobody walks into our yard, nobody comes into our driveway. So the safety of our kids are really important. So for us being just next door neighbors to this big industrial companies, 7 of them, not just one. We're just concerned about the safety of our kids, the traffic that's coming in and out, and we're just next door to it. So that's what we're really, really concerned about.
Okay, thank you for coming. And is there
Thank you.
Yep. Is there anybody else that would like to add to this discussion? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing with the right to reopen it in 2 weeks, and we'll, oh, sorry, anybody online? I forget that's, with the right to reopen it in 2 weeks at our next Planning Commission meeting. So thank you for coming, everybody. And does the commission want to do, you want to hold off discussion for 2 weeks?
I would prefer to.
Okay. So for the applicants, in 2 weeks at the Planning Commission meeting, 6 p.m., right here, we will do our discussion and recommendations.
There's a hand up.
Pardon me?
There's a hand up.
Oh,
Do you know actually the date?
that's the 17th, no, the 24th. No, 17th, I was right to begin with. So. Sure. Well, we already closed the public hearing, sorry. So the 17th, we will discuss this.
But she won't be able to talk, though, at the discussion.
Only I reserve the right to reopen the public hearing.
You can allow testimony without even a public hearing, so that's your privilege. Are there any questions with regard to the comments made that you want to discuss now instead of 2 weeks?
Has the zoning for this particular area changed? I mean, has it always been zone light industrial?
No, the applicant's property, as well as the neighbors to the south, the neighbors to the east, the business to the north, everything's been zoned commercial for 20 years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
One of the things that I can ask questions, or you may even ask the engineer, the project engineer that's here, in many instances regarding pond safety, it's a real issue, but it's also a responsibility of people to watch their kids. West Freeway Drive is a busy road without this particular business coming. They will be having a turn lane into the development, which will slow that traffic. The predominant movement of vehicles, I presume, will be to the north, not necessarily impacting this. But regarding pond safety, some of these, and again, the engineer might comment even tonight or in 2 weeks, some of these, the shelf of the ponds are such that it's not conducive to somebody just tripping and falling in. It's not impossible to fence these, but that's not done terribly often, but it is particularly in residential areas where permanent stormwater ponds exist for this reason. And you'll have to weigh those issues since this is industrial property. Sometimes the existing residences unfortunately have a lot to put up with and deal with and be careful about. In terms of other issues, noise that generates from this development, they have to meet the same requirements that all businesses do in the zoning ordinance. We do not presently restrict overnight activity, so I'm not going to tell you that it'll be quiet from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. or anything like that. We don't know. We don't have those restrictions, but they have to meet nighttime noise standards. Again, the building orientation is such, the fencing and the landscaping, that over time you hope that that balances out, but if there are complaints, we'd have to investigate it, and if there are noise violations, then we will have to enforce those requirements.
Thank you.
And they have stated that most of the work will be done indoors.
We don't have a provision because it's a parking lot everywhere on this property for somebody to be fixing vehicles or doing work outside, and for that matter, outside storage. We're not going to let them occupy parking spaces. And so, yes, if you're doing vehicle repair or wash machine repair or whatever the particular use, it's likely to be indoors. I mean, that's the nature of these businesses. They're not major office uses. They're set up for vehicles to be stored inside, vehicles to be worked on, or other things. This could be a cabinet shop, and it's going to be indoors.
Mr. Sawyer, do you have any idea what the length of the leases will be on any of these businesses?
Well, typically we would start up, a minimum lease is 3 years. But we've had other people stay for 40 years. So it just depends on business conditions.
Right.
The economy.
So there's no month to month or anything, or? Okay.
Our goal is to have them stay as long as possible.
Okay, good. Do you have any idea what kind of businesses? Do you have sent any feelers out to?
Typically what these are warehouses.
Okay.
They're not typically service industry.
Excuse me, sir, I'm sorry. Could you come up and speak into the mic? Thank you.
I was going to ask about that. Typically for these buildings, they are warehouses where materials are stored inside. There's a very small office and there's a very limited number of employees.
Okay.
Maybe 3 to 5. As Mr. Johnson said earlier, this is not appropriate for an office building with a lot of workers. Possibly service, like you mentioned, some sort of repair, but the number of employees tends to be limited, typically maybe 10 at most, and usually less than that. Typically what we like to see, it's like a plumbing contractor or electrical contractor. They store their materials and maybe their service vehicles in the warehouse. They have an office manager and a couple of employees, and that's about it.
Sure.
And you know, as far as large traffic volumes, large trucks, things like that, that's not typically appropriate for these types of buildings.
Yeah. I think it's a real good use of land myself to have an area or a building that smaller contractors can have a chance at.
Yeah, we typically market to the small business owners, so we keep the buildings small. And like I said, it's a small number of employees, you know, independent plumbers, independent electricians, a roofer, as Mr. Johnson stated, or maybe a cabinet shop. But they tend to be typically small business owners, not large conglomerates that need 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 feet.
Yeah, I think it's a real good use of the land to have that many businesses on 10 acres. I think it's great.
Well, thank you.
Did I hear Dean say earlier that they can be subdivided so there could be more than one business run out of the buildings?
The building sizes are typically 8 to 10,000 square feet.
Small.
So dividing that in half is not something that we would want to do, because then you have to start thinking about firewalls and things like that.
Okay.
So we typically keep the buildings small so that a small business can make use of all of it without having to subdivide.
Thank you.
And I might just clarify, we're not proposing it, but it's happened based on economic conditions where somebody needs to sublet in order to save their business. And I'm guessing Mr. Sawyer would consider that, but I don't think that will ever be the norm. It'd be the exception.
That is correct.
We're not prohibiting it.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, I have one more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
We will move on to number 11, the public open forum. Anybody that wants to address the commission? We'll move on to number 12, the Planning Commissioner's report. Does anybody have anything?
I have nothing.
Okay. Number 13, the Associate Planner's report. Frank?
Yeah, tonight I would like to take a little bit of time to do an in-service for the Planning Commission. So if that's all right, I will go ahead and do that. And I want to thank everyone, and I promise I won't try and take up too much of your time. I know I finally got an early meeting, so tonight I just basically wanted to start a series of in-services. So during this, you can feel free to ask questions. Part of the reason I'm doing this is I know everyone here has a different level of experience on the Planning Commission or the Planning Commission in Columbus, and I think these sessions will help the new Planning Commission members. However, I do think this will be a good refresher for all the Planning Commission members and really even myself. So in this first meeting, I'll be talking about planning legislation in Minnesota, and you can feel free to jump in, ask any questions as I go along. I might talk a little bit fast, but definitely you can let me know. And then, yeah, I'll be talking about planning legislation in Minnesota, including the important comprehensive plan component. And I think I'll go ahead and just get started here. So planning legislation in Minnesota, that is under state statute Chapter 462, Planning and Zoning. So it gives the authority for municipal planning, which is what I'll be focusing on tonight, and that includes the authority to do comprehensive planning, can authorize studies and reports for planning purposes, can appropriate money from any fund not dedicated to another purpose, and enter into contracts with private or public entities for planning purposes, and they can also collect fees in order to defray costs, but those fees do have to be a reasonable amount. So in order to do planning, need official controls, and a couple of those are zoning ordinances and subdivision regulations. So a zoning ordinance gives authority to regulate uses, density, location, building size, etc. One thing that is important is what we call non-conforming. So there's like non-conforming uses, non-conforming lots. So those can't be regulated away. So existing buildings, lot size, and uses, you can't just create an ordinance to get rid of them or anything like that. I know if you drive down Lake Drive, there's still houses in the commercial industrial district. Actually, the family we just heard earlier, that would be an example of a non-conforming use. So that is something I kind of just wanted to touch on tonight, but I'll get a little bit more into non-conformities at a later date. And some of the requirements for cities is a guide for timing and sequence of adoption of official controls, how to make zoning amendments, which is just a majority vote in our case of the city council, public hearing requirements, and again, this is another one that I'll be getting into a little bit more detail at a later date, and allowing variances to be heard. So subdivision ordinances, it gives the authority to ensure municipalities can adequately, provide water, sewage, parks, and to design it with adequate roads, storm drainage, etc. And those are some of the things that can be regulated. Another important regulation includes lot size, location, and grading, and there can be also requirements to include platting. And much like the zoning ordinances, the subdivision can allow variances to be heard, or must allow variances to be heard. And then moving on, so the planning commissions are also authorized by state statute. Those can be created by charter or ordinance. There's two types of planning commissions. There's the planning commission that's directly advisory to the city council. There are also planning departments, which is advisory to the city council, but may have a planning commission advisory to it. Now, this will be another one that I think it's better if I go in a little bit more detail at a later date, because that can be a whole entire discussion in and of itself. So there's also boards of appeal or adjustment and appeals. In our city, the city council has that function as the Board of Adjustments and Appeals. Basically, they can hear and decide appeals when an error is alleged, or they can consider requests for variances. Now, permits, that's another authority by state statute, and another one that I'll get into at a later date with conditional use permits, interim use permits, so kind of what we heard tonight. That authority for us to hear those applications is given to us by state statute in Chapter 462. And finally, there's also comprehensive planning, and this one I'll go into a little bit more detail on the next slide. So the standing state law for municipalities in the Twin Cities is the Metropolitan Land Planning Act of 1976. And this is for us in the Twin Cities, the Met Council is the authority over the regional planning. And the Twin Cities is really unique in the nation for having such a strong regional government. And this includes authority in regard to planning. I think really the only comparable one is probably Portland, Oregon. And then plans are done in a 10-year cycle, as you can see up here. So the 10-year plan started in the mid-1990s. The plans have a 20-year window. For example, Commissioner Barb and Ron, I know you two both worked on the 2040 plan that was approved in 2019. So you'll see that 20-year window there between 2019, 2040. And in the Twin Cities, the cycle never really ends. Even with the 2040 plan getting wrapped up in 2019, the census data is already collected for the next plan in 2050. The Met Council has already endorsed a working regional vision and core values draft for the 2050 plan. And where we come in Columbus for that is in about 3 years, the cities will receive system statements from the Metropolitan Council. Those include the system statements for transportation, parks, things like that. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of cruising through this, so if there's any questions. I'll just keep going here, and then again, just let me know. Some of the key local comprehensive plan components include land use, housing, parks, utilities, so water and sewer, transportation, that includes highways, airports, and transit. Bodies that review local comprehensive plans include adjacent jurisdictions, so we look at Lino's plan, Lino looks at our plan. I know here we recently reviewed Wyoming's plan. They're not in the Met Council, so it was a little bit off schedule. There's also the local county, so in our case, Anoka, school districts, MnDOT, and two entities that have to approve the plan include the Minnesota DNR and the watershed districts. And then Met Council also gets the review. Their wording is for conformance, consistency, and compatibility. And they like their alliteration, I guess. Municipal requirements include official controls. So an example here recently, in December 2021, a new zoning code was adopted, and that is one of the official controls that can be used. Implementation actions include small area studies, feasibility studies, and other ordinances. And then there is also the availability for comprehensive plan amendments. So that's just kind of to point out that these aren't, the comprehensive plan isn't rigid, unchangeable. Comprehensive plan amendments are allowed. So we've kind of seen before, more with zoning code last week in regards to potential zoning amendments. And yeah, that was a quick overview of planning legislation as well as comprehensive planning. And just in future sessions, we'll kind of keep these short. I don't think we all want to be here too long. So I'll be going over things like planning applications, what are things, you know, in my report and why they're there, or, you know, Dean's reports and why they're there, and overview of land use and zoning. And yeah, I'll take any questions here at the end, but thank you for giving me this time tonight, and we'll do some future sessions.
Thank you, Frank. Do any of the Planning Commission members have anything else they'd like to add, or I'll call for a motion to adjourn the meeting? Nobody wants to go home?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Judy?
I'll second. Bethany?
I'll call for the vote.
Judy, aye?
Barb, aye.
Bethany, aye.
Lynn, aye. Meeting adjourned at 7:06.
Thank you.